Hey, Shalom Barakah, Miss Pakah, peace and blessings, family. In this video, we're going to be discussing something that really matters, all right? We're going to be talking about the giant skeletons found in North America, all right? I like to ask this question to all my viewers. Why have no giant skeletons been discovered in modern Israel? Because think about it. When we think of biblical stories, especially during the time of Joshua, the conquest of Canaan, and David, David and Goliath, we cannot not think about the presence of giants in our land, right? When you think about our land, you have to know that giants dwelt in our land. That's a common fact. All right, so giants dwelt in our land. How come the archaeologists, when they went to modern Israel, they couldn't find no skeletons of these giants? They couldn't find skeletons of people over 5, 6 feet tall because that they were average people over there. Now, even in modern day Gaza, modern day Gath, modern day Ashdod, of what people would consider Palestine or Philistine, the Philistine areas, even in modern areas like that, they've been digging for evidence of David and Goliath. They've been digging of evidence of these tall Philistine people, and they even said themselves that these people were average height. They were not that tall because those are not the Philistines. The Philistines in Scripture were very tall. David slew Goliath. Goliath was about 9 feet tall. All right, that's a giant. So then we got the king of Ammon, Og. He was 13 feet tall. All right. Then we got the Anakims. These are a race of giants who dwelt all in our land. We had the Uzims, another race of giants that dwelt all in our land. All right. So it's important to know that these giant people lived in our land, but they cannot be found in modern Israel. So I just pose a question to anybody who claims that modern Israel is our land. Please answer why they haven't found any giant skeletons over there. All right. Now I do believe that pre-flood, before the flood, giants lived all around the earth. All right, because before the flood, the earth was one big thing. It was one collective landmass. And Genesis 6 says these giants, they dwelt all around the earth. Obviously, there were also giants found. There's also giants in Asia, like China and Iran and stuff like that. But when we're looking at the Middle East, a small area what they call modern Israel, where they say that the Israelites lived in, there have never been uncovered any giant skeletons. So we're talking about North America here. North America got the most giant skeletons out of anywhere on this planet. And we're going to be digging from two books. This is our first book, The Encyclopedia of Giants in North America. This book is simply a collection of all the news articles written in America ever since the 1800s that talk about giants. So this is a big book. You see it's thick. Every single page in this book is straight news articles, newspaper lines, newspaper headlines, where they talking about giants that they found, right? How come we got all these news articles? How come we have all these news articles? How come we have all these news articles and we still doubt the existence of these large people? Giants are not a myth. Giants did exist, and they exist in our land, which is North America. And they roamed greatly throughout this country. People will try to disqualify the scriptures because it mentions giants so much. But guess what? Giants are a historical fact that cannot be negated. However, in the Middle East, there has not been found any giant skeletons. The second book I'm going to be reading from is called The Ancient Giants Who Ruled North America, The Missing Skeletons in the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up. I like how in the title it tells you the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up, because the Smithsonian is basically the industry which puts out all the history that we know of today. All the history that we think we believe or we think is true comes from the Smithsonian. The stuff that they taught us in school, the stuff that they taught us in the stuff that's all that stuff that's mainstream curriculum history comes from the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian has to approve this knowledge first. So historically, we're not going to be learning anything about giants because the Smithsonian covers it up. And that's why I can show you a big book full of newspaper articles. This is an encyclopedia, guys, of giants. Source on source on source. Every page is a source because every page has at least 3 articles about giants in North America. So that's why we can find so many newspaper articles about giants, but you won't hear anything about it in mainstream media or history because Smithsonian covers it up. They find these tall skeletons that are taller than 15 feet sometimes, and they won't even tell anybody about it. they'll cover it up. They don't want you knowing, because what happens if you know that North America is full of giant skeletons? Then you got to ask yourself, why is the Middle East not full of giant skeletons? If the Middle East is biblical land and the Bible talks about giants, chapter after chapter after chapter, book after book after book, then you got to understand, wait, something don't add up. America is looking like the Holy Land. They don't want you thinking. They don't want you having that train of thought. Because when you realize that North America is the Holy Land and you're an Israelite and you start praying towards the right direction instead of praying toward the east, because everybody prays toward the east, they pray toward the Middle East. Once you pray towards the real land, there's actual power in that prayer. They don't want you to have that. They don't want y'all to forgive our sins. So, because they know that as soon as y'all forgives our sins, then their kingdom is over. When we pray, especially facing the right direction, there's more power in one prayer than all of their armies, all of their troops, all of their machinery, all of their equipment, all of their police, all of their military tactics. There's more power in one prayer from us than all of their hosts combined. They don't want us to actually access this power. We access the power once we pray toward our land. They don't want us to know where our land at. And that's a big reason. That's a big thing. So let's get started, shall we? History of Erie County, Pennsylvania, 1884. The embankment, when the country was cleared up, was about 3 feet high by 6 feet thick at the base, with large trees growing upon it. One of these trees, a mammoth oak, when cut down, indicated by its rings an age of 500 years. Beneath the tree, the skeleton of a human being was taken up, which measured 11 feet from head to foot. Philadelphia Times, June 27, 1885. Erie County giants, skeletons of men 10 feet high, found in cave. Mississippi as a Province, Territory and State by J.F.H. Claiborne, 1880. The Choctaws preserve a dim tradition that after crossing the Mississippi, they met a race of men who they called the Nahondo, tall in stature and of fair complexion, who had immigrated from the Sunrise. They once had been a mighty people, but were few in number and soon disappeared after the incoming of the Choctaws. This race of men were, according to tradition, tillers of the soil and peaceful. They too were giants and utilized the mammoth as their burden bearers. They kept them closely herded as they devoured everything and broke down the forest. This was the origin of prairies. History of Cattaraugus County, New York, 1879. Within the mound, there were discovered 9 human skeletons who had been buried in a sitting posture and at rectangular intervals of space in the form of a circle and facing toward a common center, but were all very large size. An os femur, the largest found here, was 28 inches in length. This would make the size of the man 8 foot 4 inches tall. Portville Review, July 7, 1949. 9-foot human giant removed from burial mound. In 1876, there was exhumed another of these giants in the Conwago Valley at Cohen's Corners, about 5 miles from East Randolph, New York. This giant Indian stood 9 feet in height, had a shin bone 28 inches in length, a foot 14 inches long, and measured 35 inches across his shoulders. Mansfield Daily Shield, November 25th, 1904. Giant skeletons. Dayton, Ohio. The skeleton of a human giant was found in the gravel pit east of a city by W.C. Fry, the owner of the pit. He found it measured about 9 feet in length. The skull was 6 times larger than that of an average Caucasian. History of Dearborn and Ohio counties, Indiana, 1885. There is a large mound in Mr. Allen's field about 20 feet high, 6 feet in diameter at the base, which contains a greater proportion of bones than anyone I have ever examined. We examined from 15 to 20, and some whose height was from 10 to 15 feet. Sunday Vindicator, Sunday, September 12th, 1897. 9 feet tall. Was this man's skeletons found in Indiana? Connersville, Indiana, September 11th. While Sexton Charles Raymond was digging in a grave in the city cemetery, he came upon a skeleton of a monster of a man. It had been buried in a sitting posture with its face to the east and was about 3 feet below the surface. The remains indicate that the being of which this was once part was a veritable giant.
probably 9 feet in height. The femur bone is about a yard long, and the massive underjaw is larger than that of an ordinary man. It is supposed that the bones are that of an Indian or a mound builder. Raleigh Herald, December 15, 1916. While grading for Fairmont and Wyatt Railroad on the B.W. Sheehan Farm near Pine Bluff, Marion County, unearthed the skeleton of what appears to be a giant of olden times. The skeleton was found in the mound opposite of residence of B.W. Boggs. The skull being something near the size of a 2-gallon bucket with a low forehead and a long underjaw. The ribs, so far as can be determined, appear to be about 3 times the size of an average man of present time. One thigh bone, which was well preserved, measured 4.5 feet in length, which shows that this person was of great height. When all these measurements are taken into context, it will determine that this man was about 15 feet tall. Staunton Speculator, Staunton, Virginia, February 6, 1889. 2 skeletons were found in a fair state of preservation, both being of gigantic stature and build. When the men were in full life, they must have been at least 12 feet high and possessed enormous strength. Oswego Times and Express, November 12, 1883. The skeletons of a giant. Kingwood, West Virginia. A human skull was unearthed here, which measured 40 inches around the forehead. The skeleton is supposed to have been 14 feet high. Newark Advocate, November 27, 1911. Immense graves containing skeletons. Prehistoric race of giants unearthed near Pine Grove, Kentucky. Measured 12 feet. World, October 7, 1895. Biggest giant ever known. 9 feet high and probably a California Indian. The Salt Lake Tribune, June 7, 1908. The San Diego Giant. The mummy of the tallest giant who ever lived was being shown at an Atlantic exposition. They asked permission to examine it, and when consent was given, applied their tapes and found that it measured 8 feet 4 inches from crown to heel. New York Times, April 5th, 1886. Monster Skulls and Bones, Cartersville, Georgia, April 4th. The water was receded from the Etowah Mound field and was left uncovered, acres of skulls and bones. Some of these were gigantic. If the whole frame is in proportion to the 2 thigh bones that were found, their owners must have stood 14 feet high. The New Sentinel, January 5th, 1919. Find giant skeletons. In life, they averaged 12 feet high. Winsboro, Louisiana, December 15th. The skeletons of a race of giants who averaged 12 feet high were found today by workmen engaged upon a drainage project at Crownville, near here.
A great many of these stories involve a race of white giants that were eventually wiped out. With few exceptions, the giants of the Native Americans were malevolent beings that wreaked havoc in the lands and had a specific taste for human flesh. The tradition of the Choctaws told of a race of giants that once inhabited the now state of Tennessee and with whom their ancestors fought when they arrived in Mississippi in their migration from the west. Their tradition states the Nawulo, which was a race of giants, were of wonderful stature. They were said to be cannibals whom the Choctaw killed whenever the opportunity arose. Chief Rolling Thunder of the Comanches, a tribe from the Great Plains, gave the following account of an ancient race of white giants in 1857, quote, "Innumerable moons ago, a race of white men, 10 feet high, and far more rich and powerful than any white people now living, here inhabited a large range of country extending from the rising to the setting sun. Their fortifications crowned the summits of the mountains, protecting their populous cities situated in the intervening valleys. They excelled every other nation which was flourished either before or since in a manner of cunning handicraft, were brave and warlike, ruling over the land they had wrested from its ancient possessors with a high and haughty hand. Compared with them, the palefaces of the present day were pygmies in both art and arms. The chief explained that when this race forgot justice and mercy and became too proud, the Great Spirit wiped it out, and all that was left of their society were the mounds still visible on the tablelands. Navajo legend describes the Starnake people as, quote, a regal race of white giants endowed with mining technology who dominated the West, enslaved lesser tribes, and had strongholds all through the Americas. They were either extinguished or went back to the heavens, end quote. The Sioux say that the earth was originally peopled by giants who were 3 times the size of modern man. They too say that the giants denied belief in a creator, and they too say that the giants were wiped out by a great flood. The Hopi tell of giants in the days before the Great Flood. These stories read nearly identical to the Bible if one allows for local flavor. According to the Hopi, there were giants on the earth in those days, and they were cannibalistic. Many of them had bred with the humans as well as infecting them with their DNA. These offspring were warlike and caused much destruction in the world. A Kachina, Masao, came down from the stars, and after entrusting the uncorrupted of the Hopi to the ant people underground, he proceeded to flood the earth and rid it of these giants and monsters. The Hopi later emerged from a cave somewhere in either the Grand Canyon or some say Montezuma's Well, and began life anew here in the Fourth World. Though some tales describe the Chino as a Bigfoot-like creature, the original legend from the Wabanaki people tells that he was once a human, but at some point committed a horrible crime for which the gods cursed him and turned his heart to ice. His frozen spirit was then trapped within the body of a lumbering troll-like monster who devours any human he can get his hands on. The Native American legends of giants are numerable. In order for us to move on to the topic of archaeological findings, here is a quick list of individual tribes and the names of their giants.
In 1848, President Abraham Lincoln visited the Niagara Falls, and he was so impressed by the beauty of this natural wonder that he wrote down some notes, including the following. When Columbus first sought this continent, when Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came from the hand of his Maker, then as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. During the 19th century, there were many accounts of unnaturally large skeletal remains discovered in the ancient burial mounds scattered across North America. Today, not a single news media has ever mentioned a thing about ancient giants or past discoveries. If a giant skeleton is discovered somewhere, it would most certainly be classified and hidden from the public. It wasn't like that in the 19th and early 20th century, though. Almost every year, there were at least a few newspaper headlines stating the discovery of ancient giant skeletons. It seemed to be quite normal to find bones of giants in America when the first settlers dug ancient mounds to prepare for roads, farms, and buildings. The New York Times, in particular, wrote many newspaper articles about the discoveries of giants. Let's read through some of them, starting with this one titled "The Bones of a Giant Found," which was published on May 25, 1882, and reads, "A skull of heroic size and singular formation has been discovered among the relics of the mound builders in the Red River Valley. The mound was 60 feet in diameter and 12 feet high. Near the center were found the bones of about a dozen men and women, mixed with the bones of various animals. The skull in question was the only perfect one, and near it were found some abnormally large body bones. The man who bore it was evidently a giant. A thorough investigation of the mound and its contents will be made by the Historical Society." Another newspaper from May 5, 1885 reads this: "Last week, a small mound near Homer was opened by some schoolboys who found a skeleton. Today, a further search was made, and several feet below the surface of the earth in a large vault with a stone floor and bark covering were found 4 huge skeletons, 3 being each over 7 feet in length, and the other 8. This article from the San Antonio Express is telling about a giant skull that is twice the size of a normal human, and there is also a picture. The article reads, "Beach giant skull unearthed by WPA workers near Victoria, believed to be largest ever found in the world. Normal head also found." That Texas had a giant in the beach in the long ago appears probable from the large skull recently unearthed on a mound in Victoria County, believed to be the largest human skull ever found in the United States and probably in the world. Twice the size of the skull of a normal man, the fragments were dug up by W. Duffin, an archaeologist who is excavating the mound in Victoria County under a WPA project sponsored by the University of Texas. In the same mound and at the same level, a normal-sized skull was found. The pieces taken from the mound were reconstructed in the WPA laboratory under the supervision of physical anthropologists. A study is being made to determine whether the huge skull was that of a man belonging to a tribe of extraordinary large men, or whether the skull was that of an abnormal member of a tribe, a case of gigantism. Several large human bones have been unearthed at this site. Another article from the New York Times, written in 1897, reads, "One of the 3 recently discovered mounds in this town has been opened. In it was found the skeleton of a man of gigantic size. The bones measured from head to foot over 9 feet and were in a fair state of preservation. The skull was as large as a half-bushel measure. Some finely tempered rods of copper and other relics were lying near the bones. The mound from which these relics were taken is 10 feet high and 30 feet long, and varies from 6 to 8 feet in width. The 2 mounds of lesser size will be excavated soon." This article from the St. Paul Globe, written in 1904, states, "Bones of a human skeleton 11 feet high are dug up in Nevada. Workmen engaged in digging gravel here today uncovered at a depth of about 12 feet a lot of bones, part of the skeleton of a gigantic human being. Dr. Samuels examined them and pronounced them to be the bones of a man who must have been nearly 11 feet in height." Apparently, these discoveries were something completely normal back in the day, and they weren't hidden from the public as they are today. This article talks of a giant's skeletons found in a cave in Mexico. The article reads, "Charles C. Clapp, who was recently returned from Mexico, where he has been in charge of Thomas W. Lawson's mining interest, has called the attention of Professor Agassiz to a remarkable discovery made by him. He found in Mexico a cave containing some 200 skeletons of men, each above 8 feet in height. The cave was evidently the burial place of a race of giants who antedated the Aztecs. Mr. Clapp arranged the bones of one of these skeletons and found the total length to be 8 feet 11 inches. Although back in the days these discoveries were made public, once the discovered skeletons were brought to the respected museums and historical institutions, they completely disappeared and no one ever talked about them again. Here is a map of all reports of giants in North America. It's truly astonishing how many of them are there. Almost all of the discoveries end up in the Smithsonian Institute, and we all know how good they are at covering up major discoveries. Major discoveries.
Why would they lie about this? What would be their profit? Thousands of reports of American giants, but in the 1960s, history just suddenly lost it. 564 giant skeletons dug up in Southern California, but now they're hidden away in the Smithsonian's closet. They'll tell you it's all a hoax, but it's a hijack, and only the wise will dodge it. But now, intelligent Israelites are finding out the truth because apparently, we're the only ones with logic. They say modern Israel is real, but with the fact that there are 0 giant remains found there, I highly doubt it. They lied to us about our history, but we knew something was up. And that's why we're still reading about it. While the idea of prehistoric giants inhabiting the United States may seem strange to us today, or the result of some fantastic hoax, in the 19th century, reports of archaeological evidence regarding giants were commonplace. In addition, one must remember that America was an agrarian society at this time, and its citizens were in regular contact with their fields, as well as the mounds and the remains they found while plowing. Knowledge of the giants was part of the current thinking, as was a heightened awareness of who the mound builders really were. As this chapter demonstrates, highly credible reports of skeletons and artifacts from the eastern states to the Pacific Ocean appeared in newspapers across the country with surprising frequency. The fact that this idea seems so strange to us today can be directly attributed, at least in part, to the role the Smithsonian played in suppressing the evidence, as attested by several of the reports documented here. Smithsonian removes 564 skeletons in Kern County, California. Find also contains 4,000 specimens of ancient Indian life. Bakersfield, California, March 28, 1934. The artifacts uncovered, classified, and shipped to the Smithsonian Institution include mortar and pestles, flint points, bone tools, textiles, shells, and soapstone beads, and other ornaments, stone vessels, and fragments of basketry. A total of 564 skeletons were uncovered in the burial mounds, of which 348 were taken from the first mound. Now, it's a fact that today, none of these artifacts, none of these skeletons, nothing can be found in any type of museum or any type of holding place whatsoever that's available to the public eye. Not one article, not one newspaper, not one website available today will talk about such finding. In fact, this is completely hidden from the public, and you will have to read into old documentations and well-studied books just to find this information out. Look at this skeleton. It was uncovered from one of the largest mounds in Indiana, and the skeleton itself is 9 feet from head to toe. Now look at this. It says figure 4.8. This find of a 9-foot skeleton in Indiana was shipped to the Smithsonian, where it immediately went into the quote-unquote memory hole. It's gone. We don't know about it. We don't know of its whereabouts. Probably burned, maybe hidden away. Who knows? But they don't want you to know about it. They don't want you to know that there was a race of giants in North America. Not only are they trying to hide the height of the giants themselves, they're also trying to hide the artifacts because they don't want people to see how ancient civilization in America once looked like. They don't want you to see what the truth is of American history. The truth is about world history. Because American history is indeed world history, there would be no world history without American history. Now look at this. 1,700 ivory beads and 5 copper bracelets made for a king. Then an excavation was done from the top of the mound to connect with the tunnel. And about the center of the shaft, another vault was discovered that contained a single skeleton. The person must have been of great importance because he was surrounded by many ornaments. 1,700 ivory beads, 500 seashells, about 150 pieces of obsidian glass, and 5 copper bracelets on the wrist. Now, they don't want you to know about this. More heavily debated hieroglyphs. In the second vault, about 2 feet from the skeleton, was found the famous stone that has been the subject of controversy on part of many antiquarians. Some claim it was a hoax. Of course, they'll claim it's a hoax. They don't want you to know about it. You ain't gonna find it on Google because they'll tell you it's a hoax. Look, if they're telling you it's a hoax, 9 times out of 10 it's real. Alright? Let's be honest. These people, you can't trust nothing these people are saying. We're gonna talk about that a little bit further on. But look at this. On it were certain characters, sort of hieroglyphs, and it was hoped by some that it would prove to be a sort of Rosetta Stone with a message from the ancient race. From an ancient race. And as you see, here's a picture of this hieroglyph. So yes, there was written language in the Americas. They'll tell you that there was not written language. Indeed, there's actually hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hieroglyphs found around the Americas, but they'll tell you that the Indian did not have any written language. That may be true for the Mongoloid Indian, and maybe even some Negroid Indian. But ancient Negroid Indian and ancient Nephilim that lived in these lands, as well as all the Canaanite and the Moabites and the Edomites and all the other people that lived in this land, as well as our people, Yastara'al, we had language in the Americas, and they don't want you to know about that. Now here is this skeleton full of beads and dressed as if they are a person of importance. And look how tall this person is. The beautiful 8-foot queen. So it's a woman in all her glory. So you got a woman that's 8 feet. So the men of this tribe would have been around 9 feet. Now this is what how the Smithsonian was actually exposed. All right, 95%. So not even 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10 frauds turn out to be true. All right, the Smithsonian, which was the first to declare the tablets fraudulent, had no experts in ancient languages, only those who thought they were, Phil said. And McCusick himself makes no claim to be a linguist. He says Phil said he has been investigating similar archaeological finds that had been labeled frauds, and we find that 95% of them are genuine. There is a tendency on the part of those established in a field of science either to ignore or label as a fraud anything that does not fit with their preconceived notion of how things should be, he said. It is much easier to cry fraud at something out of the ordinary than to investigate it, he said. Americans are throwing away 2,000 years of their history that way. That's what it is. Exactly. You know what happened before those 2,000 years? The Bible, the Old Testament. What's going on over here? Now look at the date on this one before I read. It says November 22nd, 1920. It says the Carnegie Museum claims possession of an 8 to 9 foot giant. Philadelphia Inquirer, November 22nd, 1920. Now, I don't even have to read all of this. I can just tell you right now that this 8 to 9 foot giant is no longer in this museum. The Smithsonian got rid of it. They don't want people to know that this 8 to 9 foot giant is in this museum. They don't want people to know that that actually existed, that there were people that tall. They don't want anybody to know that, all right? The Smithsonian removes tons of artifacts and skeletons from Alabama cave. None of the stuff they're taking are they leaving to the public eye. Or are they holding on public record? They're documenting it and they're keeping it to themselves, and if they did leave it to the public eye, it was a long time ago and they don't want people to know about it nowadays.
If you like to build your ruach or your spirit, you must like to build your health as well. Check out our website, J&R Eden Herbs, for all your holistic needs. We have over 100 quality products that include supplements, teas, soaps, incenses, tonics, and more at very affordable prices. Click our link in the description to heal yourself today.
By supporting my channel through patreon.com, you are aiding in the progress and production of these videos. You are also helping me raise the funds to launch official archaeological excavations throughout North America to uncover more true Hebrew artifacts and remains in this land. You will also see exclusive content that you will find nowhere else.